My name is Zelda. I'm 22, and the day my parents handed my sister Tiffany a $3,000 MacBook Pro while giving me a decade-old broken desktop computer changed everything I thought I knew about family fairness. What started as a simple conversation about college technology needs turned into the most revealing moment of my life, exposing years of favoritism that I'd somehow convinced myself was normal. As I stood there watching Tiffany smirk while unwrapping her pristine laptop, completely oblivious to my devastation, I had no idea that this blatant act of preference would trigger a chain of discoveries that would expose dark family secrets and ultimately lead to the most satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear. The blood loyalty I'd clung to was about to shatter completely, revealing truths that would destroy the perfect family image we'd maintained for decades. Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolutely wild story about sibling favoritism that literally exposed criminal behavior and destroyed my entire family's reputation, tell me, where are you watching from today? If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, or if you love stories where justice finally gets served in the most unexpected ways, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this revenge story is going to blow your mind. Growing up as Tiffany's younger sister meant living in a constant state of comparison and disappointment. While I worked part-time jobs throughout high school to save money for community college, Tiffany had been accepted to prestigious Northwestern University, with my parents eagerly covering her full tuition, room, board, and living expenses. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. She was the academic achiever, the social butterfly, the daughter who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Dad owned a successful medical equipment distribution company, while Mom worked as a high-level administrator at the local hospital. Together, they generated a comfortable six-figure income that afforded us a beautiful suburban home, luxury cars, and expensive family vacations. But somehow, those resources always seemed to flow primarily toward Tiffany's needs and desires. The pattern had been established early. When Tiffany wanted piano lessons, they hired the best instructor in town and bought a baby grand piano for our living room. When I expressed interest in art classes, I was told to check out books from the library and practice on my own. When Tiffany needed a car for her junior year of high school, they purchased a brand new Honda Civic. When I turned 16, I was given Dad's old work truck with 200,000 miles and a broken air conditioning system. The academic expectations were equally skewed. Tiffany's A- was celebrated with dinner at expensive restaurants and shopping trips. My straight A's were acknowledged with a brief good job and expectations that I would maintain that standard without recognition or reward. When she scored 1,400 on her SATs, they threw a party and invited extended family to celebrate. When I scored 1,450, Mom mentioned it casually to my aunt during a phone conversation. College preparation revealed the depth of their investment disparity most clearly. Tiffany received professional SAT tutoring, college counseling, and assistance with application essays from a hired consultant. Her college visits involved flights across the country, hotel stays, and elaborate campus tours. Meanwhile, I researched schools online, filled out applications alone, and visited local community colleges during my lunch breaks from my job at a retail store. The laptop incident was simply the final, most blatant example of treatment I'd somehow normalized over the years. As we both prepared for our respective fall semesters, her at Northwestern, me at the local community college, the conversation about technology needs arose during a family dinner in late July. Tiffany's going to need a really good laptop for her engineering program, Dad announced, as if this was a given. Something powerful enough to handle CAD software and complex calculations. I've been researching options, Mom added, pulling out printed specifications and reviews. The MacBook Pro seems like the best choice. It's expensive, but it's an investment in her future. I took a deep breath and seized what I thought was an opening. I'll need a computer too for my classes. Something basic would be fine, just for word processing and internet research. The pause that followed was telling. Dad and Mom exchanged glances, and I could see the mental calculation happening. Tiffany's computer was clearly a priority. Mine was an afterthought. Well, Dad said, slowly, we have that old desktop computer in the basement storage room. It should work fine for basic community college coursework. That old desktop computer was a relic from 2010 that hadn't been functional for at least 3 years. The hard drive had crashed, the monitor flickered constantly, and the keyboard was missing several keys. It was essentially electronic garbage that they'd never bothered to dispose of properly. But the worst part wasn't the broken computer itself, it was Tiffany's reaction. As Dad described this solution to my technology needs, she didn't even try to hide her amusement. The smirk that spread across her face was pure satisfaction, as if my disappointment was entertainment for her. She knew exactly how unfair the situation was, and she enjoyed it. "That sounds perfect for you, Zelda," she said with false sweetness. "You don't really need anything fancy for community college anyway. It's not like you're doing real engineering coursework." The casual cruelty of that comment, delivered with a smile while my parents nodded in agreement, crystallized something fundamental about my family dynamic. I wasn't just less favored. I was actively diminished to maintain Tiffany's elevated status. That night, as I lay in bed listening to my parents excitedly discussing Tiffany's laptop specifications and college prep shopping list, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done accepting their version of normal. I was done pretending that this treatment was justified or acceptable. I had no idea that my quest to understand why I was treated so differently would uncover secrets that would destroy the very foundation of our family's respectability. Determined to prove that I deserved equal treatment, I decided to document the financial disparity in how my parents supported us. What started as a simple exercise in gathering evidence for a family conversation became an investigation that revealed disturbing truths about where my family's money actually came from and where it was really going. I began by tracking obvious expenses: Tiffany's tuition payments, her car insurance, her clothing allowances, her extracurricular activities. The numbers were staggering. In the past year alone, my parents had spent over $40,000 on Tiffany's education and lifestyle, while spending less than $2,000 on anything related to my future or well-being. But as I dug deeper into bank statements and financial documents that I found while helping Mom organize her home office, I discovered inconsistencies that didn't make sense. The family income my parents reported on financial aid forms was significantly lower than what their business records and tax documents suggested. They were claiming financial hardship to justify my community college path while simultaneously hiding substantial wealth. The medical equipment distribution company wasn't just successful, it was generating nearly $800,000 annually in profit. Dad's business bank statements, which I photographed while he was traveling, showed consistent monthly deposits far exceeding what he'd ever discussed with the family. More concerning, there were regular transfers to offshore accounts and shell companies that had no obvious business purpose. Mom's hospital position provided another revelation. Her salary was nearly double what she'd told me when I'd asked about college funding. But more disturbing were the payment records I found, showing that she'd been receiving consulting fees from pharmaceutical companies, payments that seemed to correspond directly with the hospital's decisions to purchase specific medical equipment from those same companies. The pattern that emerged was clear. My parents were engaged in systematic kickback schemes, using their positions to steer business toward companies that paid them under-the-table commissions. Dad's distribution company wasn't successful because of superior service or competitive pricing. It was successful because Mom was using her hospital influence to guarantee purchases. But the most devastating discovery came when I found Tiffany's real academic records. The perfect grades and test scores that had justified her expensive education were fabricated. Her actual Northwestern transcripts, which I discovered in Mom's locked desk drawer, showed she was barely maintaining a 2.3 gigapascals and was on academic probation, the prestigious engineering program she supposedly excelled in. She'd been forced to change majors twice and was currently pursuing a general studies degree with no clear graduation timeline. Every conversation about Tiffany's academic achievements had been a lie designed to justify the massive financial investment in her education. Meanwhile, I'd been pushed toward community college despite having significantly better grades and test scores than she'd ever achieved. The corruption went deeper. I found evidence that my parents had paid bribes to admissions counselors to secure Tiffany's Northwestern acceptance. Bank records showed $25 0 inches consulting fees paid to a company owned by someone with the same last name as Northwestern's former admissions director. They'd literally bought her way into college while telling me I needed to prove myself at community college first. The financial records revealed something even more sinister. The money they'd been spending on Tiffany's lifestyle wasn't just family funds. It was stolen money skimmed from the kickback schemes they were operating. Every expensive dinner celebration, every shopping trip, every luxury they provided for her was purchased with money they'd illegally obtained through corruption of the healthcare system. I realized that my treatment as the less deserving child wasn't just about favoritism. It was about covering up criminal activity. By keeping me financially dependent and academically limited, they ensured I wouldn't have the resources or credibility to question their lifestyle or investigate their business practices. As I sat in my tiny bedroom, surrounded by evidence of my family's corruption and lies, I understood that the laptop incident wasn't just about unfair treatment. It was about a family that had built their entire lifestyle on criminal behavior while maintaining a facade of respectability through my sister's fake achievements. They thought they were protecting their secret by keeping me small and powerless. They had no idea they'd just motivated me to expose everything. What I discovered about my family's criminal enterprise was just the beginning. Over the next several weeks, I systematically documented a network of corruption that extended far beyond simple kickbacks. Working late nights after my retail job, I pieced together a sophisticated scheme that had been operating for nearly a decade. The medical equipment distribution company was essentially a front for money laundering. Dad would purchase equipment from overseas manufacturers at drastically inflated prices, then sell it to hospitals, primarily Mom's hospital, at even higher markups. The consulting fees Mom received were kickbacks for ensuring these overpriced purchases went through without competitive bidding. But the scheme was more elaborate than simple overcharging. I found evidence that much of the equipment being purchased was either defective, outdated, or completely unnecessary. Hospital departments were being forced to buy expensive machines they didn't need, while essential equipment requests were denied or delayed. Patient care was being compromised to fund my family's luxury lifestyle. The offshore accounts revealed the true scope of their operation. Over the past 8 years, they'd moved nearly $3.2 million through various shell companies, avoiding taxes and hiding the proceeds from their illegal activities. The money wasn't just funding Tiffany's education. It was supporting a lifestyle far beyond what their legitimate income could afford. Tiffany's role in the scheme was more significant than I'd initially realized. Her frequent internships at Dad's company weren't real work experience, they were money laundering operations. She'd been receiving paychecks for jobs she'd never performed, allowing my parents to move money through her accounts and establish her as a legitimate employee for tax purposes. Her Northwestern tuition wasn't just being paid illegally, she was actively participating in the crimes. The most shocking discovery was that I'd been deliberately excluded from the family business specifically because of my academic integrity and moral standards. Email conversations I found between my parents discussed their concerns about my rigid ethical standards and tendency to ask too many questions. They'd recognized that I would never participate in their corruption, so they'd systematically marginalized me to protect their operations. The laptop incident suddenly made perfect sense. They couldn't afford to give me quality technology because my academic success might lead to questions about their lifestyle and resources. Keeping me struggling and dependent ensured I'd be too focused on survival to investigate their business practices. But their biggest mistake was underestimating my determination. The very qualities that made them exclude me from their criminal enterprise, my attention to detail, my ethical standards, my refusal to accept unfair treatment, were exactly what I needed to expose them. I spent weeks gathering irrefutable evidence: bank records, email communications, business contracts, hospital purchasing documents, academic transcripts, bribery receipts. I assembled a comprehensive case that documented nearly a decade of systematic corruption. Every expensive gift they'd given Tiffany, every luxury vacation, every celebration of her fake achievements was purchased with stolen money. The psychological impact of these discoveries was devastating. Every family dinner where they'd praised Tiffany's hard work while dismissing my actual achievements. Every time they'd claimed financial constraints while secretly sitting on millions. Every moment of feeling inferior and unworthy, all of it had been based on lies designed to cover up criminal behavior. But as I prepared to expose their crimes, I realized I needed help. The complexity of their financial schemes required expertise I didn't possess, and I needed to ensure that my evidence would stand up to legal scrutiny. That's when I reached out to Professor Martinez, who taught business ethics at my community college and had previously worked as a forensic accountant. Professor Martinez listened to my story with growing alarm. When I showed her the evidence I'd collected, her expression became grave. "Zelda," she said, "carefully what you're describing isn't just family favoritism or even simple fraud. This is systematic healthcare corruption that's affecting patient care and stealing from taxpayers. We're talking about federal crimes with serious prison sentences." She helped me understand that my family's crimes had victims beyond just me. Every overpriced piece of equipment, every unnecessary purchase, every kickback payment ultimately increased healthcare costs for patients and insurance companies. They'd been literally stealing from sick people to fund their luxury lifestyle. Working with Professor Martinez, I developed a plan to gather the final pieces of evidence needed for a prosecution. She introduced me to a former colleague at the FBI who specialized in healthcare fraud. Agent Thompson agreed to meet with me unofficially, and when she reviewed my evidence, she immediately recognized the significance of what I'd uncovered. "Your family has been operating a sophisticated healthcare fraud scheme," Agent Thompson explained. "The equipment kickbacks alone represent millions in stolen funds, but the patient care implications make this a high-priority case. However, we need current evidence of ongoing crimes to build the strongest possible case." She outlined a plan that would require me to do something terrifying, pretend to reconcile with my family, and gather evidence of their current criminal activities. The FBI would provide me with recording equipment and legal protection, but I'd have to convince my parents and Tiffany that I'd accepted their treatment and wanted to be included in the family business. As I sat in that FBI office looking at the evidence that would destroy my family's freedom forever, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was anger, certainly, about years of mistreatment and lies. But there was also sadness for the family relationships that had never really existed and fear about the consequences of what I was about to do. But then I thought about the patients who'd suffered because of their greed, the taxpayers who'd been robbed, and the years I'd spent believing I was inferior when I was actually the only honest member of my family. Justice needed to be served, and I was the only one who could serve it. The investigation was about to move into its final, most dangerous phase, and I was ready to see my family face the consequences of their choices, no matter what it cost me personally. Working with the FBI required me to become someone I'd never been before, a manipulative family member capable of convincing my parents and sister that I wanted to join their criminal enterprise. Agent Thompson provided me with sophisticated recording equipment and coached me on techniques for gathering admissible evidence, but the psychological burden of deceiving people I'd once loved was enormous. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would approach my parents with apparent maturity and humility, acknowledging that my community college experience had taught me to be more realistic about life and success. I'd express admiration for their business acumen and request guidance on how to build a successful career like they had. Based on their psychological profiles, people who needed to feel superior and in control, the FBI predicted they would welcome the opportunity to mentor me into their way of thinking. Making that initial phone call was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done. Hearing Dad's voice, surprised but pleased by my apparent change in attitude while knowing I was gathering evidence to send him to federal prison, required every ounce of acting ability I could muster. "Zelda, sweetheart," he said, his tone warmer than it had been in years. "I'm so glad you're finally understanding how the real world works. Your mother and I have always known you had potential. You just needed to learn some practical lessons about success and compromise." The reconciliation dinner was surreal. There I was, back at the familiar table where I'd been diminished and dismissed for years, wearing a wire and listening to my family celebrate what they believed was my newfound willingness to lower my ethical standards. They interpreted my request for business guidance as evidence that I was finally ready to abandon my naive idealism and embrace their pragmatic approach to wealth building. Tiffany was particularly condescending during that first dinner, offering advice about growing up and understanding that everyone cuts corners to get ahead. She had no idea that her smug superiority was being recorded and would eventually be used as evidence of her knowing participation in criminal activities. The real breakthrough came when they decided I was ready to learn about the family business model. Over the course of several weeks, they systematically explained their entire operation to me, believing they were educating a willing protege rather than confessing to an FBI informant. Dad walked me through the equipment purchasing process with obvious pride, explaining how he identified opportunities in the healthcare market and developed relationships with key decision-makers. He described his meetings with hospital administrators, his strategies for identifying budget vulnerabilities, and his techniques for positioning his products as essential despite their inflated costs. The key, he told me during one recorded conversation, is understanding that everyone in healthcare administration has budget pressures and career ambitions. If you can help them solve their immediate problems while advancing their personal interests, they become very cooperative partners. He was essentially confessing to systematic bribery while believing he was impressing me with his business sophistication. Mom was even more direct about the corruption. During a private conversation that I recorded on my phone, she detailed her role in manipulating hospital purchasing decisions and explained how she identified which administrators were susceptible to financial incentives. "Medical equipment purchasing is incredibly complex," she explained, "and most doctors don't understand the technical specifications or cost implications. That gives administrators like me enormous influence over multi-million-dollar decisions. The key is making sure those decisions benefit everyone involved: the hospital, the vendors, and the decision makers. She showed me detailed spreadsheets, tracking her kickback payments, presented as examples of performance-based compensation that I should expect in any successful business career. She was completely unaware that she was providing evidence that would result in federal racketeering charges. But Tiffany's contributions were the most damaging of all. During family dinners where they'd had several drinks, she would boast about her role in the money laundering operations, describing her fake internships and fraudulent paychecks as examples of smart tax planning and family business. Integration. The beauty of the system, she explained during one dinner, is that everyone wins. I get work experience and income, Dad gets legitimate business expenses, and Mom gets reliable purchasing partners. It's just creative financial management. She had no idea that her casual descriptions of money laundering and tax fraud were being recorded and would eventually result in federal conspiracy charges. The psychological toll of this double life was enormous. I had to sit through family dinners, listening to them congratulate themselves on their criminal cleverness while pretending to be grateful for their mentorship. I had to nod appreciatively while they explained how to identify corruptible hospital administrators. I had to smile when they discussed patient care decisions being influenced by kickback considerations. But what kept me going was the knowledge that every conversation, every document they showed me, every casual admission of criminal behavior was being recorded and would eventually bring them to justice. They thought they were bringing me into their circle of trust and criminal conspiracy. In reality, they were providing the FBI with everything needed to prosecute them under federal racketeering statutes. The FBI team was amazed by the quality of evidence I was gathering. Agent Thompson told me that most healthcare fraud cases required years of financial analysis and undercover operations to prove criminal intent. My family was providing full confessions, detailed operational procedures, and real-time documentation of ongoing crimes. After 3 months of this operation, we had everything needed for prosecutions that would result in decades of federal prison time. The evidence was overwhelming, the crimes were severe, and their own words would convict them. Agent Thompson scheduled the final meeting to review our case before the arrests. As I sat in that FBI conference room looking at transcripts and recordings that represented my family's complete destruction, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing that justice would finally be served, but also profound sadness for relationships that had been built on lies and criminal behavior from the beginning. The little girl in me still loved them and wished things could have been different. But the woman I'd become understood that some crimes are too serious for family loyalty to excuse, and some betrayals too deep for forgiveness to heal. Justice was coming, and it would be swift and absolute. The FBI had coordinated with multiple federal agencies to ensure that when they moved against my family's criminal enterprise, every aspect of their operation would be dismantled simultaneously. The timing had to be perfect. Raids on their home, Dad's business, Mom's hospital office, and Tiffany's Northwestern dorm room would happen within minutes of each other to prevent evidence destruction or flight. Agent Thompson explained that healthcare fraud cases often involved sophisticated criminals with significant resources and international connections. My family's offshore accounts and shell company network suggested they'd developed contingency plans for escaping prosecution if their schemes were discovered. The FBI couldn't risk giving them any warning that their operation had been compromised. My role in the final phase was perhaps the most psychologically challenging yet. I needed to maintain normal family contact right up until the arrests, ensuring they had no suspicion that their criminal confessions had been recorded and analyzed by federal investigators. This meant participating in family dinners, attending Tiffany's university events, and even helping them plan their next phase of business expansion. The most surreal moment came during Tiffany's fall break visit home. She'd returned from Northwestern full of stories about her college experience. Stories I now knew were largely fabricated to hide her academic failures and ongoing participation in the money laundering scheme. Watching her describe fake achievements while our parents beamed with pride, all while knowing that federal prosecutors were preparing charges against all three of them, was almost unbearable. During that visit, Dad made an announcement that nearly broke my composure. "Zelda," he said, his voice filled with unusual warmth and approval, "your mother and I have been discussing your future. We think you're ready to take on a more significant role in the family business. We want to offer you a position as Junior Operations Coordinator, working directly with me to develop new healthcare partnerships." The job came with a $55,000 starting salary, full benefits, and a company car. It was everything I'd dreamed of during those years of working retail jobs and struggling through community college. It was the acceptance and recognition I'd craved my entire life. And it was being offered just days before their arrests would make it all meaningless. "We've also decided," Mom added, "that it's time to address the technology disparity. We're buying you a top-of-the-line laptop, even better than Tiffany's, to support your new responsibilities." The cosmic irony was staggering. They were finally ready to treat me as an equal family member, just as I was about to destroy them completely. The laptop that had symbolized their favoritism was now being offered as part of their attempt to recruit me into their criminal enterprise. I managed to thank them gracefully, accepting the position and expressing gratitude for their faith in me. But inside, I was screaming at the absurdity of it all. They were offering me a career built on stolen money, criminal corruption, and patient harm, and expecting me to be grateful for the opportunity. That night, Agent Thompson called with the final timeline. "Monday morning, 6 a.m. simultaneous raids. Your family will be arrested at their respective locations. All assets will be frozen and the business will be seized." Are you prepared for this? I thought about everything they'd put me through. The years of favoritism, the deliberate marginalization, the casual cruelty, and the systematic criminal behavior I'd been forced to document. I thought about the patients who'd been harmed by their greed, the taxpayers who'd been robbed, and the healthcare system they'd corrupted for personal gain. But I also thought about the genuine moments of family connection, the times when I'd believed their love was real, and the years I'd spent hoping that someday I'd be worthy of their respect and investment. Those memories made what was coming both necessary and heartbreaking. "I'm ready," I told her. "Let's end this." The weekend before the raids was the strangest of my life. I attended a family barbecue where relatives congratulated me on my new business position and praised my parents for finally recognizing my potential. I sat through Tiffany's stories about her Northwestern experiences, knowing that her academic fraud would be exposed within days. I listened to Dad discuss his expansion plans and Mom describe her latest hospital partnerships, all while knowing that federal agents were finalizing their arrest warrants. Sunday evening, my parents insisted on taking me shopping for professional clothes to wear in my new position. As we walked through expensive department stores picking out outfits I'd never actually wear, they talked excitedly about my future with the company and their pride in my maturity and growth. "We always knew you had it in you," Dad said as we selected a business suit. "You just needed time to understand how the world really works." "You're going to be so successful," Mom added, holding up a designer blouse. "Much more successful than we ever imagined when you were struggling with those idealistic notions about ethics and fairness." That night, as I laid out my new professional wardrobe, clothes purchased with stolen money for a job that would never exist, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The broken computer and Tiffany's smirk had seemed like the worst betrayal possible. Now I understood it had been the catalyst for exposing crimes that had victimized countless people and corrupted essential healthcare systems. In less than 12 hours, my family's world would collapse completely, and for the first time in my life, I felt ready to watch it happen. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, as if the universe itself was ready for justice to finally be served. I sat in an FBI surveillance vehicle 2 blocks from our family home, watching through multiple camera feeds as federal agents surrounded the properties where my family members would soon face the consequences of their crimes. At exactly 6 a.m., the coordinated operation began. Dad answered the front door in his bathrobe, expecting to find a delivery driver or perhaps a neighbor with an early morning emergency. Instead, he found Agent Thompson and a team of federal investigators with arrest warrants and search orders. Simultaneously, Mom was being arrested at the hospital, and Tiffany was being taken into custody at her northwestern dorm room. The precision was breathtaking. Within minutes, the entire criminal enterprise that had defined my family for nearly a decade was being dismantled piece by piece. Bank accounts were frozen, business assets were seized, and the shell company network was being traced across multiple jurisdictions. I watched Dad's face change from confusion to shock to desperate rage as Agent Thompson read him his rights. Through the surveillance footage, I could see him shouting, probably demanding to call his lawyer, likely threatening political connections and business relationships. None of it mattered anymore. The evidence was overwhelming, the case was airtight, and his years of buying his way out of consequences were over forever. The media coverage began within hours. By noon, every local news station was reporting on the Morrison medical equipment scandal, a multi-million-dollar healthcare fraud scheme that had corrupted hospital purchasing and harmed patient care for nearly a decade. The headlines were everything I could have hoped for: local business, family arrested in healthcare, fraud medical equipment kickback scheme exposed, hospital administrator charged in corruption case. But the sweetest moment came that evening when the full scope of the charges was announced. Dad faced 89 counts of healthcare, fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and racketeering. Mom was charged with 67 counts, including conspiracy, bribery, and corruption of public institutions. Tiffany, my golden child sister who'd smirked at my broken computer, faced 45 counts of money laundering and conspiracy that would likely result in decades in federal prison. The irony was absolutely perfect. They'd spent years telling me I wasn't smart enough for business, wasn't worthy of investment, wasn't deserving of the same opportunities they provided Tiffany. Yet I'd been the one to uncover their crimes, build the case against them, and orchestrate their complete downfall. The financial devastation was immediate and total. Dad's medical equipment company was seized by the government, its assets frozen, its contracts canceled. The family home went into federal receivership. Tiffany's Northwestern tuition payments were clawed back as proceeds of criminal activity. Mom's pension was frozen pending restitution calculations. Everything they'd built, everything they'd valued, everything they'd used to prove their superiority over me, gone in a single day. The psychological impact was even more satisfying than the financial destruction. Local media interviewed former hospital employees who spoke about Mom's arrogant attitude and suspicious purchasing decisions. Medical professionals described Dad's aggressive sales tactics and questionable product quality. Even Northwestern University issued a statement distancing themselves from Tiffany and reviewing their admissions processes. Agent Thompson kept me updated on their jail experiences. Dad, accustomed to commanding respect and deference in business settings, was struggling with the reality of being just another federal prisoner awaiting trial. He'd apparently tried to bribe guards, demand special treatment, and threaten other inmates. behavior that only resulted in disciplinary action and solitary confinement. Mom, always so concerned with her professional reputation and social status, was devastated by the public exposure of her crimes. Her hospital colleagues avoided any association with her. Her professional organizations revoked her memberships, and her carefully cultivated image as a respected healthcare administrator was destroyed forever. But Tiffany's downfall was the most poetic justice of all. The golden child who'd built her entire identity around being superior to me was now facing the longest potential sentence of all three. Her fake academic achievements were exposed in court documents, her Northwestern enrollment was terminated, and her role in the money laundering operations was detailed extensively in federal indictments. The trial lasted 8 months and was covered extensively by local and national media. I testified as the star witness describing years of family favoritism that had masked systematic criminal behavior. The defense tried to portray me as a jealous sibling seeking revenge, but the evidence spoke for itself. Hours of recorded confessions, detailed financial records, and documented patient harm. When the verdicts came down, I was sitting in the gallery watching my family face the consequences of their choices. Dad, 22 years in federal prison. Mom, 16 years. Tiffany, 18 years her sentence, reflecting both her active participation and her role in legitimizing the money laundering through fake employment. As they were led away in shackles, Tiffany caught my eye one last time. The smirk that had defined her attitude toward me for so many years was gone, replaced by a look of complete devastation. But there was also something else. A grudging recognition that the sister she'd dismissed as inferior had orchestrated her complete destruction. The financial restitution exceeded $4.2 million money that was returned to healthcare systems and taxpayers. I received a whistleblower reward of $850,000 under federal law. More money than my family had ever spent on my education, earned by doing what they'd always told me I was too weak and stupid to accomplish. Today, 3 years later, I own my own healthcare consulting firm, specializing in fraud prevention and ethical purchasing practices. Professor Martinez is my business partner, and we work exclusively with hospitals and medical systems to prevent the kind of corruption my family perpetrated. The irony isn't lost on me that I've become exactly the kind of person they claimed I could never be. Successful, respected, financially independent, and ethically principled. I've used part of my whistleblower reward to establish a scholarship fund for students from families who don't support their education equally. Every year, I help dozens of young people escape the psychological traps of toxic family favoritism and build lives based on merit rather than manipulation. My parents and Tiffany are all still in federal prison with no possibility of parole for over a decade. Dad will be 71 when he's eligible for release. Mom will be 66. Tiffany, my golden child sister who smirked at my broken computer, will be 41. Assuming she maintains good behavior and serves her minimum sentence. Sometimes I wonder if they think about that day when Tiffany got her $3,000 laptop while I got a broken desktop and her condescending smirk. Do they remember how superior they felt, how justified they believed their favoritism was? Do they understand that their moment of casual cruelty was actually the catalyst for their complete destruction? I hope they do. I hope they lie awake at night in their prison cells understanding that the daughter and sister they treated as inferior became the architect of their downfall. I hope they finally comprehend that intelligence, determination, and moral integrity are worth more than criminal wealth and fake achievements. The Morrison family legacy isn't the successful business empire they thought they were building. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate someone simply because you have the power to diminish them. They forgot that favoritism based on criminal behavior is ultimately unsustainable, and that the child you dismiss might be the one with the strength to seek justice. So let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced sibling favoritism so extreme that it made you question your own worth? Have you witnessed families where criminal behavior was hidden behind a facade of success and respectability? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because family justice stories like mine prove that sometimes the best revenge comes from exposing the truth that toxic families work so hard to hide. If this story of sibling rivalry turned criminal justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories that prove karma is real. Share this video with anyone who's ever felt like the forgotten child in their family. Sometimes the people who dismiss us are the ones who should fear us most. Thank you for joining me on this journey from broken computers to federal prosecutions. Remember, when family treats you as inferior while engaging in criminal behavior, sometimes the best revenge is proving them completely wrong about both your capabilities and their invincibility. Until next time, keep fighting for the justice and equality you deserve.